Hello on behalf of Film Music House and White Bear PR. My name is Matthew Wang, and I'm a film and TV composer and host of the podcast Composer Talk, where I interview the people behind the music of our favorite shows, films, you name it. On that topic, we are here today to talk with some of my favorite composers about writing music for docuseries. So I guess we'll just start off with intros. Maybe we can start with Wendy. If you could just give, just like a little introduction about yourself and some of your favorite recent projects.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here and talk about my passion. I love scoring films and all kinds, but documentaries have been a huge part of my life. I don't know, I've done a large number of them, and I started when I was 18. I'm blessed because this was an answer to my dreams to be able to find a way to combine my love of film, my life, which is composing music, and ideas. And so I came into it very early. I've scored over 140 films or something like that. I love meeting the people that I get to work with. And in documentaries, probably more than the fiction world, I get to actually combine a sense of my politics, which is just basically for me a word that connotes something beyond our small community. It's the larger community. I've always been active since I'm 13 in caring about the larger community. It just is in my blood. So to find documentaries that say something that might educate and change the world in some ways mean a lot to me. And in the way I score, I try to create small audio revolutions as well. My latest projects, I guess, that I'm really excited about is the series for Netflix called Crime Scene, Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. And I just finished that recently. And oh gosh, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, we will talk more about it in a sec. Osei, want to introduce yourself next?
Well, after Wendy's introduction, I don't know really what I have to say. I really, I also compose film music for films, for documentaries, and it is absolutely a passion. Making music every day is, I think, one of the most amazing things that's ever been gifted to me. And it's all I really want to do. And I think, especially in documentary, much like Wendy said, I just, having the ability to inject your politics and your worldview and having it align with your work is, I think, an even greater blessing than just being able to play music or write music every day. Just feeling as if you're doing some good in the world is an incredible thing. So yeah, that's probably it. And then series I'm excited about. For Netflix, there's a recent series called Amend, The Fight for America, which I'm super excited about. Also another one, High on the Hog, for Netflix. And two films, Dear Mr. Brody and So I Stayed. All four of them just really combining all of those things I just mentioned, telling stories that align with my politics and my worldview and making music.
Amazing. Last but not least, Nainita.
Hi, everyone. I mean, how can I top what you've both said? What you say, I totally agree with and absolutely align with. You've said it more eloquently than me. I've been writing music. I guess I'm known for writing music for documentaries over the last 20 years. My career has digressed and I've worked in many different genres, from fiction to features to dramas to video games, and but I guess the core of my career has always gravitated around documentary. And from my love, what you said, Wendy, from my love of film, my love of music, and being able to be a part of something greater than the sum of those parts. There's this expression, true life is stranger than fiction. And it's not just about projects with social impact and, political views, and yes, all of that. But there's incredible stories out there, true real life stories that deserve a platform. And for me, it's an absolute honor and privilege to be to play a small part in with working with teams of people, the collaboration, the collaborative process. It's a joy to work with people bringing the story out to the wider world, and having audiences engage with issues and subjects that can sometimes be a little bit dry when you watch the news, and when you watch when you watch social current affairs programs and the news. It can bring you down emotionally a lot of the time, and the weight of the world is upon your shoulders, particularly over the past year. But when you tell these stories in engaging ways, that make people want to, when you can move people emotionally and tell stories in true cinematic, beautiful ways, it's just an incredibly powerful medium to be a part of. So it's a joy to be writing music for documentaries in all its many facets.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it leads us to a point I want to talk about first, which is just the purpose of music in a docuseries. I've only done a couple documentary projects in the past, but I know that on both, actually, I think there was always a discussion about not trying to lead the audience. So, oh wait, this is like, we're gonna go here, so I'll just throw in, make a shift here, make it scary, and not telling the audience how to feel, versus not also just creating like a looping bed. So I'd be curious to ask each of you about your approach to scoring under dialogue for a docu-series, and how it's a little different than other types of projects in film and TV.
Well, yeah. So, do you want to go first, Wendy?
Oh, sure. I think it's, I think we all have scored fiction and nonfiction. I think there is a big difference. Theater is a whole nother bag, but fiction, you can, because it isn't real in some iteration, in some sense, you can sometimes go be much more present, let's say, than when you're writing under somebody that you know and exists and who has a life that you have to really tread upon with delicate, in a delicate way, out of respect, allowing the story, as you say, not overwhelming with music in the right places. It's actually a little tricky to explain, but all I can say in a better way for me is, how do I approach a documentary? I look at the film, I absorb the film becomes part of me almost physically, and then I get away from it. I don't want to be tied to the image immediately, because then I can roam and create some themes that to me are going to synthesize what I believe the director wants to impart with the audience. We are the bridge. For me, I'd say music is probably one of the three most important elements. Maybe I'm overdoing it, but for me, music is huge. As you were saying, Nainita, music is the bridge emotionally to people, and without it, it might not be as effective. In other words, we are there in an invisible way to touch people and to help emphasize different aspects of a scene, or bring forth something about the characters that might not be readily visible. This is also true in fiction, but in documentaries, we really have an important role. Sometimes it is didactic, the information. How do we make it more poetic and emotional, and connect the audience so that they feel what we feel needs to be said, that we discuss with the director, but we also have this intuitive reaction. Some of us are just hardwired that way. We see it, we breathe it, it comes out, and it's amazing. It is magical. Music making is magical, and film scoring is magical, how it happens. but I would say that delicacy in the right places is really welcomed. When we can step forward and really make a point, I think that's also welcome. I mean, a lot of times we have to create the tension that might not be right there, or a connection with the heart. Anyway, I hope that gives a little flavor of what we're talking about.
I just building on that. I think that when I come to a film, the story is already being told a lot of the time. The story is there, and perhaps it's not being told in exactly the way that the director or the storytellers hope that it's going to be told. But it's up to me to sort of find the thread that connects all the various characters or people, the subjects, and whether it be human subjects or storytelling subjects that are represented in the film, and find a way to give voice without interrupting the voice that's already there. Thinking about it as magic, I mean, that's really what it is. It's like finding a way to be active and alive, but not be a bed, but not be static, and at the same time not interrupt the flow of what's already there. And in terms of creating tension and sort of the different spaces that we're sometimes allowed to occupy, I think there's, depending on the kind of storytelling, the pacing of the film, you have all kinds of opportunities to, sometimes you're big and sometimes you're really very, very present, and other times you're sneaky and you're just that person that's there in the background pushing the audience to really recognize what's happening in the moment without letting them know you're there at all. And I think that that's very exciting. So, in docuseries, I think a lot of the time, the pace of storytelling is a little bit faster than it is in a 2-hour verite film, or in even a 2-hour film that is not verite. And there's differences between all of them. And that's before you even get to the fact that all the stories are different. So I think putting yourself in the film and allowing it to be a part of you and really feel possessed by the story is a big deal. And I suppose later on, maybe we'll have a chance to talk about what then, how politics or even our love of storytelling plays into allowing ourselves to be possessed by these stories. Because I mean, it can take all of you to be that part of the story, even though it's not necessarily something that belongs just to you or is yours alone.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I didn't fully answer the first question, actually. Some of my recent projects that I'm excited about include For Sama, which was a couple of years ago now. That was a very successful documentary, all told through the first-hand experience of the co-director who lived through the Syrian uprising and civil war. The Reason I Jump, which came out in US cinemas earlier this year, about nonverbal autism, and American Murder, a feature documentary on Netflix that came out last autumn, which was quite an astonishing story. And to answer your question about the approach of writing for documentaries, for me, my way in tends to be, is the same as it would be if I was scoring fiction in many respects. For feature documentaries, it's quite thematic, and I tend to dive in. I do research, when I have creative writer's block. I mean, I don't believe there's any such thing as writer's block, but when you're challenged and trying to find a way into a project, I dive in and I study the subject, and I learn and read books, and I watch other documentaries, and I find out as much as I can about the subject matter. And where, to the point where, I choose very carefully in terms of the kind of projects that I get offered and that I want to align myself with. In fact, I've just turned down a project which didn't sit with my political ideology, and was a very tricky subject, because it's about Palestine and Israel. And I'm thinking, do I really want to work on this? How is it going to be perceived by the audience? So so research, diving into the subject matter, having in-depth conversations with the director and trying to understand their vision and their approach. I agree with you about having to, well, I think in terms of music for documentaries has so much potential in being manipulative, and we have to tread a very fine line, walk a very fine line in terms of how intrusive do we have to be. And I remember there were a couple of scenes in For Sama as a little case study. The most powerful moments in that film actually had no music in those scenes. And I remember I scored it, and we sat back and watched it and thought, why do we have music here? What's the function of it? What's the point of it? And we took away the music. And the power of the scene was so harrowing and so emotional. And I've had audiences come up to me at the end of screenings and say, those scenes were amazing, Nainita. And I said, great, I had nothing to do with them, apart from the fact that where you choose not to have music is so important. You know, to me, silence is music as well, and the way you craft the landscape and the dynamics of a score in terms of the emotional highs, where you do want to amplify the story in certain moments, and then where you strip it right back and have absolutely nothing, and have those peaks and troughs is really powerful, and that's something that takes time, and and work on projects that take many months to edit, and you're going, I've scored for Sama in 3 different ways, in 3 different musical approaches over the course of 18 months, and so for me, I'm going on that journey with the filmmaker, on that following that narrative arc, and that it's like they're like a sculpture where you've got hours and hours of material and footage, and you're just chipping away at it, finding the right path and the road to go down along with the team, and that I find that process is really very nourishing, to and very creative and very nourishing, and you feed off each other. That I find the journey is, I know it's a cliche, but the journey is so much more important than the end result sometimes. So yeah.
I hear you. Beautifully said.
I love that you touched on just the idea of research when projects do come up, and I think in some ways most composers do some level of research when approached about any kind of project. But specifically with like a docuseries, like do you, I mean, I guess anyone here could talk about the process of trying to do research. Do you talk to people who might have more of an understanding of the subject, or do you just go online immediately? And in this process of research, do you feel like musical ideas come up too?
Yeah, I mean, I scored The Reason I Jump, which won Sundance 2020, and that was a fascinating journey. I think the edit lasted 15 months, and I studied. I really dived into the world of autism, and I was in connection with the contributors, and I read the books, on the book upon which the film was based. I read a lot of scientific papers and research papers to understand how sound and music play a huge effect. They're a huge part of the way in which autistic people perceive the world. So, and I integrated a lot of the concepts that we discovered through the research, and try to translate them into the music, and integrate it with the sound design and the music. So yeah, sort of answer your question a little bit. I mean, yeah, research is really important. I go online, listen to music, but obviously have collaborative discussions with the editor and the sound designer and the director and the producers. And in the case of For Sama, I worked with the contributor, who the film was about, this woman and her family. And so I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. And I particularly love it when I actually hear from the contributors once they've had screenings of the film. I've just finished a true crime series for Netflix, and the family of the deceased contacted me personally after watching the screening of the films, and said that they felt that the music did justice to the victim's memory, and that brought tears to my eye. That means more to me than anything. That's the greatest honor for me.
I think it's very interesting to see, coming back to the potential what we do has to change the world is incredible, and we're all speaking to projects in our work that have affected change. For me, in Paradise Lost 3, we were trying to get some justice for 3 young men who were in jail and not guilty of the crime they were jailed for. And talk about responsibility. I feel exactly what you're feeling, Nainita. In terms of research, I mean, these guys were into heavy metal, so obviously that was going to potentially play into what I was scoring, but it was the themes that I felt were very critical. I wanted to be progressive and find fresh new sounds that in my minds were metaphors for who these 3 characters were. But I wanted to connect the audience because I thought they'd get on board and help these guys get free. And this was, again, that kind of passion where you feel you're not going to do anything else with your life except for focus on this as the film changes, keeping in step with the editor. And for me, also critical is the director's input. And it meant everything to me. I'm very proud of that score. And more importantly, as part of a film that did help free these 3 young, innocent men. Those are the kind of things we have the power to do. We research towards that end, but it's about commitment and passion. And I think we were also mentioning that when your heart is connected to what you're doing and you feel that passionate about it, you are going to reach the highest height of your abilities. It's even beyond you. It's about commitment, basically, and hard work. And yes, if it takes 18 months, it takes 18 months. It's not about time. It's not about a lot of the smaller issues. It's about commitment. Girl in the River was another one that changed law in Pakistan, and I couldn't believe that. But this was the commitment of the filmmakers, and together, united, we made something that impacted and change in such a direct, incredible way. To be able to combine your art form, as you were saying before, with what you believe in life is quintessential. I guess we just have to keep doing it.
Yeah, I when I'm coming to a project, I do definitely research in the sense that I might watch anything on this subject that has happened before. If there's a book written, I'll read that. A lot of times when I'm finding my way in that way, a memory will come up of a sound, some idea of something that I've heard in the past, and I know that it's connected to what I'm reading or to what I'm watching. It's independent, but I know that my brain is making that connection. It's telling me, okay, go there now. And so when I was working on Amend, which is the Netflix series that I guess came out earlier this year, the document, the 14th Amendment was the document that the whole series is about. And even though I knew that the story was going to be presented that way, that's why I went. I said, all right, I'll read this piece of paper and see what it is. And then I started, I guess, being able to watch some scenes here and there. And watching it and having read the amendment, it brought sounds to to the forefront of my mind that I wouldn't necessarily, it's not a place that I was existing before. And so I knew that those textures and colors had to be brought into the score. And I think a lot of the time it happens that way in any story, you know, and it might be that the director has said, hey, you know, I'm thinking this, what do you think of that? And as we talk about the story, it's sort of, you start hearing ideas or developing a theme, and it's there, and really the trouble is how do you bring it out into the world? It's in your head. It exists like with textures and colors and motion that you might not be able to express immediately, but it's there. And really the only thing you have to do is figure out how it's all going to work together.
It's really interesting. I had very quickly, the sound palette was also another way in. I mean, I remember on American Murder, I integrated the sound effects from the film because the whole film is based on social media and Facebook messaging and texting and home videos. And so I actually took the sound of the mobile phone and I tapped my fingers and created rhythms out of the sound of the fingers tapping on the mobile phone. I just thought it was a more visceral way of connecting the audience with the subject of the film. And for Sama, the initial brief from the director was to create a rich Hollywood symphonic score, which I did, and I wrote 80 themes. And then after 12 weeks, we realized that was the totally wrong direction. Because the whole tone of the film changed. And I brought in one instrument. I brought in the sound of this, I brought in this violinist who plays the violin, and he's from Syria. He's a Syrian refugee, and authenticity is really important for me in the scores for documentaries. You know, trying to be true to the story. And so musically, I brought in the sound of this rough, raw, gritty violin that totally represented the crumbling city of Aleppo, the raw, visceral, edgy sound that wasn't pure and classical. And so trying to find those musical textures and aesthetics that match the tone of the film and the subject matter is a way for me to be authentic and true to the story as well.
It's funny that, sorry, go ahead, Wendy. Please. No, you go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, you know, it's, oh no, now I've lost the thread. It's gone.
All right. Well, I was just going to say, I love playing with sound too. You'll get it back. You got it. We need you.
I got it. It's here.
You're triple idea. You want to go?
No, you go. I wrote it down.
Okay. No, I mean, it's about expanding the palette. You know, what you were just saying about using those fun sounds. You know, we're super creative people who just love making each day special by making up something new. And so it's finding every day, how can you do something new that you didn't do yesterday? That's why, I mean, I've been doing this 30 years. I feel like every score and every day is new. From Holocaust films where people were marching in Lodz Ghetto all the way back, you know, taking the marching and making that into rhythmic tracks, or the lack of food, chopping up onions and making that sound like marching. It expands our already existing palette, which to me create little audio revolutions, which if we're getting into being progressive and trying to make a better world, how do we titillate people's ears and hearts by creating new sounds? So maybe they think a little bit differently and more out of the box that day. I mean, that for me is exquisite, and my, you know, always what I'm reaching for. How can I do something fresh and different without sounding overly intellectual? Because at the end of the day, I also really believe in the power of melody and theme. If you want to grab somebody by the heart, it's probably going to be with the exquisite palettes that we have in the traditional world, and I mean the world over. We shouldn't ever limit ourselves. I speak several languages, and I want to speak every language because we're all one family, this world. People have just divided us up with names and borders and stuff we never bought into, and tell us we're different because of gender or color or skin or religions. All this stuff totally invented by people. don't get it. I don't think any of us do, but all that to say is that how do we keep creating new things so that we titillate people and make them as well think out of the box and stand and keep progressing forward.
I'm going to steal what you said, Wendy. You create little audio revolutions. I love that.
Yeah, well, we're revolutionary. We're revolutionaries in our art form, aren't we? We're scientists. We're inventing things. I am into astronomy as well. I don't see any distinction. I love math. I mean, it's all part of the all. And so, yes, I feel exactly what you're saying about authenticity. I think we're all related. We are all related. We are all out there doing, and I love meeting you for this reason. It's like finding kindred spirits out in a world where we feel very alone, because most of our lives, for me, is in a dark room by myself. And I love it, but I don't love it. I feel very lonely a lot of time. But it's the only way I can focus and get the best thing, because I feel so responsible to the people who are working their butts off to make the best film that they can to change the world, or to make beauty or poetry, or make people laugh. It's all important. But integrity is a huge part of that. And I am with you in that, always trying to find what is the right palette that brings us closer. Girl in the River, I hadn't been to Pakistan. I had to find a bridge to take me there. I wanted new sounds, but I wanted something that might connect, but I don't want to be so on the nose. So where does that lead you in your way of thinking? When we choose our paint colors, basically, I like to think, because I'm also a painter, what colors am I choosing to make this cue? What is going to touch people the best way? What is, the director has to feel on board. We're not working alone. We're working for the people, the filmmakers. And it changes. There are people who really want to tell you what you have to do. And there are people who say, listen, I totally trust you. I worked with you for 20 films. Go do it, I'm sure, and we'll tweak some things. So there's that range. But integrity is an extraordinary part of what we do. I think we choose our colors with tremendous care. I think we choose our themes with tremendous care. We were saying before we started recording, what we do is one of the most delicate art forms because it's invisible. It's something that is heard and felt. We don't see the music. And the process is grace. We have to keep on sculpting away until it fits right. It might be a huge block of wood when we start with a scene or a theme, but we carve it until it fits right, giving it the space, giving it the rhythm, giving it pauses. All those things are part of this extraordinary magical process that we are part of, and that we sit back and respect and let it show what it needs to be, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And just I want to go back to you.
Oh, I mean, I guess the only thing I was going to add earlier on was that, I was thinking about the edit and how perhaps like a theme or textures or a palette comes to mind, or is sort of suggested by any research that I might do, or any conversations that I might have, or anything that I watch. It sort of starts to bubble up and percolate and come to a surface. And then it's really about calibrating it to the edit. And the edit is constantly changing, which means the idea is going to change and it's going to evolve with that edit. And it's going to be something different than the thing you initially heard. So in birthing it and like bringing it into the world, it's going to be, it probably entirely changed from the thing that you heard or thought. And that's really exciting to me is evolution, like these evolving ideas and changing ideas that, you're in control of to some extent. You can, of course, do anything you want with it, but because we are telling a story, we're not in control. We have to lose control to some extent while sculpting and actually crafting. And that's exciting, sort of doing both of those things at the same time, losing control and keeping control. It's, yeah, that's all.
Can I just say something? That's an interesting point, is like when we come into the process, for some people, it's at a rough cut or almost a fine cut stage. And for other people, people really like you to come in at the lock stage. And it's very, very different for us at our end, because if something for me is constantly shifting, yeah, of course, I'm going to go with it. But there's something also beautiful about coming in when it's almost done, because then I know my sketch is going to really stay that way, and I could just finesse it from there. I think, you know, if you're like me, you see pros and cons in everything, but where we come in is really an interesting element in our process and does affect things. Because, well, just quickly, for me, I see a film, I absorb it completely, and I go off to the piano and I play for 5 hours. And usually in the first few days, an 11-minute piece comes out, and it's got the essence of most of the main themes. And then I have to get into colors and orchestration and arrangements. But that to me is amazing, because to me, it's like falling in love. Your first reaction could be your best reaction, your most gut felt reaction, your most honest reaction. And I don't know how you feel about that, but that's been often my experience, and I find it kind of thrilling.
Yeah.
I think they all, oh, I'm sorry. I think I'll finish and just say, I think it's all exciting. I think any way that you come at it and any way that you get to the other side as the journey is the exciting part. And so either way.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. I've found many different processes, and having to be flexible and pliable with the way that directors want you to work, and also producers, because, you know, I've come in on projects really late in the day, when I remember working on a feature documentary, The Confessions of Thomas Quick, when the director had been editing it for 6 or 7 months. They'd been temping away, and with all sorts of film scores. They gave me they gave me the locked cut and said, you've got 5 weeks to score this film, 5 or 6 weeks. And the temp was dreadful. And I said, look, please trust me. I threw away the temp, and
yay.
And I was allowed, but there was a lot of trust from the director, and he was taking huge risk. He didn't know what I was going to throw up, and I love the genre of this particular film, and said, look, let me the images speak to you, and the story and the tone, and I took away all the music and started from scratch, and I found this unique palette of sounds that then I dived into, but then I personally, I love coming in really early before they start editing even, and I have these discussions, and I'll write. It's like throwing mud against the wall. You write lots of musical ideas. You're free. You can be, wild and free with your musical ideas, and I'll write themes, and then sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't, and it's a bit like throwing mud against the wall, and then your score evolves as the and the palette and all that evolves as the edit evolves. But I don't, working like that, I think where you're free of the pressure, away from the pressure of the edit, and you haven't got a really tight deadline or a TX date or a launch date, means that sometimes when you're working under pressure, to a tight deadline, you create music under this culture of fear, where you're afraid that if you make the wrong move and you write the wrong music and it's not accepted, you're going to be fired, And I love those long gestating projects where it's an organic experimentation process, where, if you write music and it's not working, it's not a bad thing. There's no right or wrong. You're just trying things out. Things may not work. You've got the freedom to try something else, and eventually you find your path.
I think that's brilliant. If you don't mind me just commenting on what you just said, and I think it's very important for the young composers to know that if there's a way to see the film without the temp music, or to see it and then get rid of it, you're in a much better space to do your own better score. It's my favorite story is a fiction film I did with Juan, who did Secrets in Their Lives. Anyway, great Argentine. We did 15 films together, and I saw this film, The Boy Who Cried Bitch, great film, black and white, without any music, and it all worked. Okay, I'm putting us all out of work. The film worked without us. To me, it was brilliant because they had to make sure the story was being told. The music wasn't going to have to fix something. It was all working. I then came on and put on one of my best scores ever, which I still love to this day. And this is 30 years ago, this film. It worked. And I love us then coming on. We can then freely spot it where we really feel the music should go. And then there's all this space to write your best score because you're not being fed ideas that could be good, but maybe you could come out with something better, like you were just saying. And time, as you were just saying, is a very incredibly important element. I had to do a series, like most of us probably did, Profiler, where you had to, in 6 days, score a fiction drama, 43 minutes, and it was wall-to-wall music. And it had to be great, and it had live recordings, and it was constantly changing till the last day. Pretty crazy schedule to give to people. That's what TV is like. And wouldn't we like to have a bit more space and time to be able to come up with our best incredible ideas so that we can enhance the film even better? So if there's time and there are filmmakers out here, yes, time is another thing to give your composers.
I definitely, go ahead, Nainita.
Time more than budget, actually, because we all want to do the best work and give, you know, when you're writing music, you're imparting a little bit of your soul. And so when you're criticized, you know, your work is critiqued by the director. Oh, I'm not sure. It hurts a little bit inside because you give it your best shot. And for me personally, I always find that my first attempt at something is always, you know, my vision undiluted, and then you have other voices coming in, which means that then that vision gets diluted. Not that it's, you know, I mean, it's a collaborative art form, so you know, we work together to create the best we can for a project. But so I'm not saying that my opinion is the best and the right all the time. But yeah, sorry, I was interrupting you.
Oh, that's okay. I was only going to say, you know, I appreciate time in I guess also whatever form it's given. So I love when I have time to think about an idea and let it sort of build in me, and then create something that is, maybe it's my best idea, maybe it's not. Maybe it's my best idea for me, and maybe it's not for the project, and that's okay also. And I think when I'm writing, I'm going to be writing, I'm going to be making music, I'm going to be creating, I'm going to be telling stories, and hopefully I'm telling it, what I'm hearing and what I'm trying to create hews as closely to the vision that the director or producer will be happy with. But ultimately, if they're not, then it's already done. I had that experience of making, and granted, going back is always difficult. I think with a gentle hand, or with, you know, really strong direction, I'm always so excited to say, all right, well, let's see how else we can approach that. Only because it gives me another opportunity to dive in. What will this new story be? You know, sometimes it's more difficult if it's not, I guess, leveled in a way that I can understand immediately, or is somewhat unclear to me. Then I get, you know, like anyone, confused. I want to imagine that what I've told already is the best I can tell, or is the truest I can tell, but it can always be something else. And I think depending on how that's asked of me, or how I'm directed to do that, I can make something even better, as a general term, better, not in terms of just the story.
I think that's really cool what you're saying. And I think it really points out that a composer has to be ready to really feel strongly about what they're putting forth and have confidence in it. And at the same time, be open that the director's going to come along and say, you know, that's really wonderful. Hopefully they say it like that. But I was kind of thinking like this, you know, and
Right.
like you say, the approach should be in a healthy, positive way, that it gives us an opportunity to try our hand in a different perspective, because we are not all knowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to wrap this up. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, you're wrapping it. I was just going to one last thing. I just want to jump on that all-knowing, Wendy. I think that is always, you know, we're talking about bridges, and I think that's always the most difficult thing is figuring out how to know more and how to really communicate about music, because we can have an idea and we're not able to communicate it as well as maybe we want to, but more importantly, we can't present it as a complete idea without knowing what it is that we're supposed to be saying. That was much more unclear than I wanted to be. Again.
It's funny. I was wishing that the three of us were just jamming, because I was recording all night long and I have no idea if anything I am saying makes any sense, but I'm really
beautiful.
trying. And if the three of us were just jamming, I wonder how that would, or the four of us, forgive me, Matthew, you're a brilliant, wonderful composer. The four of us were making music together. How would this interview or panel sound musically? Wouldn't that be so much fun and so cool?
Maybe our next one, we can build something as we sit.
Yeah.
I would love it.
Me too. That'd be fun.
Oh, so much.
Books. We'll make sure to get White Bear to set this up. But I just want to say a special thank you to Wendy Blackstone, Osei Essed, and Nainita Desai. Behalf of Film Music House, White Bear PR, Composer Talk, and myself. It's been a great conversation to be a part of, and hope you all enjoyed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am thrilled to meet you all, and anybody out there listening, I hope that we were able to share, to help.
Thank you.
Yeah.